What's up, Jay? It's time for me to go ahead and do this little podcast. I woke up about 30 minutes ago. Right now, it's 3 a.m. Yes, it is 3 a.m. I'm in my crib. It's pure silence. Somebody who live above me is woke right now because I can hear them stepping. I just saw a beam of light outside. So, when you're living in a major city, people are up at 3 a.m. I remember I used to go outside at 3 a.m. all the time, be on the buses and train and all that. And believe it or not, 3 a.m. is like the most calm and cool time to actually be out simply because nobody's out. I'm talking about the streets were so dead that you can literally hear traffic lights click. The hand signal, you can hear it click, click, click as it blinks. Yeah, man, streets are done pretty peaceful. But I'm not talking about that today. Today, we're going to talk about your favorite subject to discuss, which is Ghost. And right now, I'm not really insecure about discussing it because, I didn't feel anything while I was here. But, me and you always talked about the concept of, Ghost and why 3 a.m. played such a pivotal role. You know, told me that when you did the little Ouija board thing, you always hear these weird sounds happening at 3 o'clock a.m. Doors clicking and things like this. And even when I visited the Clewiston Inn down in Florida, I would hear weird stuff happening at 3 a.m. that I couldn't explain neither. So let's delve deeper into the concept of 3 a.m. and how it pertains to ghosts. So what I'm going to do is read a few articles, and we're going to basically discuss what's on these articles. So you always wanted a long video about ghosts. I'm going to go ahead and give it to you, buddy. So, let me go ahead and read this article. It is by someone named Simone Mefford, TrueGhostTales.com. Let me see if this website is still up, because sometimes on these e-zine articles, although the person, yeah, it's still up. 2012. Okay. So let me go ahead and just read this one. It's called Shadow Creatures, Mysteriously Beings, or Mysterious Beings of the Paranormal World. On a regular basis, my husband and I see these things we call shades, or as other people may have met that have told us about seeing these things. We call them shade or shadow creatures. Frankly, I have no clue as to what these things actually are and what are their purpose. Now, you remember I told you about the little quote unquote shadow creature that I seen. It was in my other apartment where I was up around this time in my room. Nobody else was up. I had my door open. It looked like somebody walked past my door. Wasn't 100% sure what it was. So when I looked down the hallway, all I felt was a jolt of energy go through my body because I was so scared because I didn't see anyone up. I walked through the house, went to every room to see if any of my peoples was up. We was living with 6 people at the time, all family members. Everyone was asleep. So of course I was scared for the rest of that night. But shadow people do exist and shadow energies do exist. Now I feel insecure about talking about this at night at this time, but I always wanted to do this, so I'm doing it now. I think I'll be okay. Let me continue reading, man. Frankly, I have no clue as to what these things actually are and what their purpose is. Over the years of observing these creepy things, I have noticed that they do not like bright light and usually show up around the hours of 11 p.m. till around 3 a.m. Now, as you can see, this lady said they don't like bright lights. It's that whole boogeyman culture where don't look under the bed because you never know what's under there, and they're more active when it's dark because essentially when it's 3 a.m. it's dark. But the moment you shine a bright light, they tend to scatter and disappear. So it's very essential for you to keep all your lights on in your house to discourage those paranormal beings from being active. All right, let me continue reading. We have seen these shadow creatures during the day, but only in areas where it's heavily shaded or on days that is very overcast. They seem to really show up on nights when, even though it might be a full moon, the nights seem very dark in spite of street lighting and a full moon. It has a rather sinister feel to it. Let me stop right there. See, the thing about it is people always try to make it seem like, dealing with ghosts, dealing with higher powers and energies and whatever is an evil thing. And many speculate it comes from the Haitian Revolution. See, back during the Haitian Revolution, when the French tried to invade Haiti and the Haitians wasn't going, they said, no, we won't be slaves. So what they did was fought back. And one of the ways they fought back was getting on the same page spiritually. Some call it voodoo. Others call it just connecting with nature and the higher power. And basically using the higher power and nature to um, for their benefit. Now, I don't know if you just heard that. That's the reason I paused for a minute, because I heard a door creeping open and I became extremely scared. But it was just somebody in the crib opening the door, that's all. So that's the thing about ghostly encounters, man. Sometimes it ain't what it seems. Now, I remember you told me that when you had your experience, you heard the door click. And then the next day it was open without any prompting. And I asked you, like, man, was there a pet in the crib? Could have been somebody in the house. I mean, something. It has to have been something physical, something with the energy that unhooked that latch and opened that door. But you told me no. So that's explainable. If you're keeping it real with me, that's unexplainable. But let me continue reading. The shadow creature seems to be attracted to negative energy. They also seem to herald some trouble brewing. It's almost as if these shadow creatures feed on negative energy or take some sort of delight in misery or sorrow. That sounds just like you, Jay. Yeah, the beings might be attracted to your negative energy when you're talking mess online and you're calling people all of these names. I mean, even you told me that's why you like getting on there, because you like talking mess freely without any consequences. Well, I think being negative will attract those energies. So think about that. Let me continue. These things range in size from about 3 feet tall to around 3 to 8 feet tall. The shape is hominid like, and sometimes they have reddish glowing eyes. Most people only see these things out of the corner of their eye, but a few of us can see them straight on. Yeah, I kind of saw mine at the corner of my eye because I was looking to the right or the left or whatever, and when I moved my head, I could see them. Now, some people could say that this is an optical illusion because, of course, when you move your eyes from left to right, you're gonna see some hints of a shadowing, either white or black or whatever. So yeah, always keep that in mind. And like I said earlier, I forgot to finish my thought, but people try to make it seem like the ghostly spirit world is evil because of the Haitian Revolution. Because what a lot of Haitians would do, they would basically get together and use voodoo to, like, keep the French off. So they would actually kill themselves because they value death over life in order to save the entire Haitian population from becoming slaves. And they were successful at it. So after then, especially in America, that's when you started seeing these negative images of, the Walking Dead or zombies and these higher powers. From what I hear, even down in New Orleans right now, you said you always want to come to America, right? Where New Orleans is like the mecca for voodoo. I mean, that's like that's it. I mean, you got that murky, swampy feel. You got a lot of Haitians down there, man. A lot of people who practice voodoo. But I hear that on Bourbon Street, which is the main strip, that they have a couple of voodoo shops that have devilish symbols in it, such as a behemoth head. You know what a behemoth head is, right? just sitting in the window, and that has nothing to do with voodoo or real voodoo. So yeah, so unfortunately, the dominant society, as Tariq would say, really turn the spiritual world into something evil. But you never know, because when you look at TV shows such as Ghost Hunters, you will see that some of these violent spirits will actually push over one of the hunters. And if it's real, that's your reason why. I'm not saying that the ghost hunter guys exert negative energy. It's just that when you carry that on your heart, you tend to attract it more. Let me continue. My husband and I do, and a couple of my friends of ours see them straight on as well. And apparently, if they realize you can see them, they let it be known that they can see you too. They would generally sort of swell up like a cat puffing up, trying to scare you. Or if they notice that you can see them, but otherwise they cannot seem to really do any harm. So you hear that, Jay? They can't really seem to do any harm. So you got to understand, and based on my little bit of knowledge, that there's different types. Of course, you have the shadows and you have the orbs, which are small, white, cloudy lights or whatever. And then you have like the poltergeists. And those can be like the violent ones, because you start reciting certain things, or in your case, you start playing with Ouija boards, and then you bring up a physical being. Yeah. So those can be the ones who actually can touch you and things like that. These protections, let me continue reading. These protections can be in the form of protection spells or verses from Psalms written down and hung up on your door, or laying down some blessed salt across the doorways and the window sills works well too. Personally, me and my hubby like to use both. Yeah, so she's mostly talking about the negative ones, and like I said, of course, there's negative ghosts and positive ones. I mean, if you go to some of these housing projects, you might run into some negative gangster ghosts. It all depends on what the person was in their past life, which will determine what type of ghost they become. And as you already know, many of the slave plantations here in America, which I'm sure around the world, but especially here in the USA, specifically in places like Louisiana, they're haunted. And many slaves died at these slaves plantations. And, you know, you never know if a descendant of a slave, I mean, master, yeah, a descendant of a slave master go into some of these slave plantations, they might become scared. But that's the thing about it, is that you have descendants of slave masters still living at some of these plantations here in America. They turned them into like tourist attractions or whatever, but it doesn't negate the ghostly energy that's there. Even on Ghost Hunters, there's several slave plantations that they actually visited. So just imagine if you're, a quote unquote racist white person, and you're in a slave plantation where it's haunted, you might get your issue. Just think about that. So it's kind of like that movie. What's the name of it? Leprechaun in the Hood. Something like that, where the ghostly energy was put into a doll, small doll, and the doll was chasing the white supremacists around, trying to get them. So yeah, just think about that, bro. So, but yeah, this lady, she's continuing to talk about the concept of these paranormal experiences, but she mostly talking about like negative ones, because not all of them are negative, of course. She has a very interesting site called TrueGhostTales.com. She'll read some more. I'm sorry for the pause. Let me pause it right quick. 1 second. All right, I'm back, bro. I just had to pause it for a second. I'm back, but while I was sitting here, I was thinking about how the certain person who live here who's very evil but claim that they're spiritual, who always talk about they're connected with it, call everybody it. And it is basically the evil energy that gives her the heebie jeebies. And I mean, you could be sitting still not doing anything and she will accuse you of communicating with the quote unquote devil and meddling with her. I mean, crazy. And I mean, I would take what she say to heart. The thing about it, she was wrong, like the majority of the time. And that's the thing about it. When you hear people talk about the spiritual stuff, you got to always ask, do they have any mental problems? Or do they have any drug addiction problems back in the past? Because when a person is abusing drugs, or if they're around mold, because mold can create an environment that's very toxic. You start breathing it in and you start hallucinating. Or if a person just have, as I said earlier, a mental disability, because that can make them see things that ain't there. You always got to ask these questions before talking with anybody about ghostly things, because their experiences could be hallucinations and they could be wrong. Just like that documentary you showed me where those people up in Australia was talking about those haunting, well, no, they was talking about the UFOs or something like that. And every small piece of feather that dropped from the sky was a UFO to them. I mean, those people was on one. And it's funny because when they talk in a very serious manner. So you got to always evaluate that before having these conversations with people. I always try to look at this from a logical standpoint, you know. Um, Let me continue reading. Now, also I was thinking too, let me just put this in there, that the same person I was just talking about, they love evil energy. They claim that they're positive, but they love going off on people being negative, being evil. I mean, and yeah, it's kind of messed up. But that's very interesting that that person woke up at 3 a.m. Maybe it is the witching hour, because that's what they call it, the witching hour. When you do a simple Google search, it talks about the concept of the witching hour being active at 3 a.m. Let me go ahead and read what Wikipedia say. And that's another thing about Wikipedia too. If you ever attended university, in your case, Jay, you have, the teacher will always tell you never to use Wikipedia because anybody can put anything on there. I mean, I seen some inaccurate information where it says that the south side of Chicago was 92% black or 98% black, something like that. I'm like, dude, are you crazy? Are you crazy? But then I realized that the quote unquote south side of Chicago is a street term. So, and also I changed that article and my edits are still on there. But let's just read what Wikipedia has to say right quick about the witching hour. And it has supernatural in quotations. I mean, not in quotations, in parentheses. So, in folklore, I'm sorry, I paused for a minute. In folklore, the witching hour or the devil's hour, that's that devil word again, is a time of night associated with supernatural events. Creatures such as witches, demons, and ghosts are thought to appear and to be at their most powerful. Black magic is thought to be the most effective at this time. In the Western Christian tradition, the hour between 3 and 4 a.m. was considered a period of peak supernatural activity due to the absence of prayer in the canonical hour. I don't know what that is. During this period, women caught outside without sufficient reason during this time were sometimes executed on suspicion of witchcraft. The phrase witching hour was first recorded in 1835. And let me talk about that witchcraft thing right quick. My teacher used to tell me that, like, back in the day, you already know, back in the day, boy, especially here in Europe, I think, Europe or here in America, I mean, a dude, he had to just accuse his wife of being a witch. she's a witch. Once you accuse somebody of being a witch, they will literally burn you at the stake in front of the whole town. I mean, people was on one. They would just take it to the extreme, and people was quote unquote abusing this spiritual system that was not bound by any laws. This was just a superstition thought up by people, and they would actually act on it. So it's very interesting that if you was a woman caught out at 3 a.m., you would get like burned, which is like sexist. That's like some sexist stuff that ain't prominent anymore. You understand? I mean, because you can't. I mean, you can prove spirituality because the spirit and the energy can be negative. People who have died, I forgot what it's called. I'm gonna look it up later. The Graham test. People who have died became lighter than they were when they were alive, like on their deathbed and whatever. So yeah, it's funny how they call it the witching hour. And in places like Africa, superstitions are real. I guess that's why we're so superstitious. When I talk about I'm talking about like, my family and just, black people in general. Even with me, when I dream of certain stuff I think is real or it's a answer to something. And you already know in your case, the precog stuff, yeah, it is real. But it's kind of funny because there's a guy who hosts a TV show, River Monsters. I forgot his name. It's Jeremy something. And he goes to Africa and fish these murky waters trying to catch the next 300, 500 pound river monsters. And in some of these villages, people are quote unquote primitive and they still practice these superstition ideas. And there was this one time he was in East Africa and he basically had one of the village's shaman or, guide or whatever kind of go with him to the, river to try to find this fish. Now, this guy didn't come back to the village. And, people like, hey, if this dude don't come back, that means that you were cursed, Jeremy. You cursed him. And since that happened, you got to get killed. And he said, like, they would have straight up killed him. But fortunately, the guy did come back. Now, you know what's funny? I was thinking about Peru lately. And I did some research. And in the Amazon, there was a Canadian guy who killed one of their shamans. Or I didn't read the story, so I don't want to put, no incorrect words on it. But it was something related to a shaman in an Amazon village and a Canadian and a gun. I don't know what happened. I didn't read the story. But anyway, the person got killed and the whole village literally lynched the Canadian. You know what I'm saying? But I wouldn't say that's on no spiritual stuff, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there since it was already on my mind. But let me continue reading. It says the psychological literature suggests that apparitional experience, and you know what an apparition is. It's like an outline of a person. It's similar to the shadow people they was talking about earlier or whatever. Um, and since presences are most common between the hours of 2 and 4 a.m., corresponding with 3 a.m. peak in the amount of melatonin in the body. Some stuff, the chemical process when you sleep, basically. Let me continue reading. More recently, the hours between midnight and 3 a.m. have been considered a witching hour. The term may be used colloquially to refer to any period of bad luck in which something bad is seen as having a greater likelihood of occurring. Yeah, this is like I said, this kind of gets into the evil realm where people put their negative spin on it. So yeah. What's interesting about this True Ghost Tales website? I still got it up and I see a few very interesting um articles that I think you will find interesting. I'm gonna read them. But let me continue with this witching hour concept. So I pulled up another article. Wait, hold on one second. Okay, bro. So I just pulled up another article about the witching hour. My fault. I'm sorry. I think the generator in my building. I'm not sure it's a generator, but some type of motor that's normally going all night just stopped, and it feels like my ears are like pushed in, kind of like when you're on the plane. Yeah. But anyway, that's normal. So let me read this. But according to this blog, astonishinglegends.com, this guy said, this is why I think many people focus on midnight just as much as 3 a.m. because midnight is the time between 2 days, and many believe that the veil between the worlds is at a weak point, allowing for a heightened level of communication between our world and another. So you hear that? Communication between our world and another around 12. So, and then everything becomes active around 3. So, and you got to keep in mind, this is during the REM sleep cycle, where your heart rate, cardiac pressure, breathing rate, and arterial pressure becomes irregular at this time, which is why you might feel anxious when you suddenly wake up during those hours. You hear that? That's according to a website called StoryPick, which makes a lot of sense because if you're just waking up, maybe you're more prone to these things. Maybe you got in tune with it more, with the higher power and the supernatural energy more, or maybe it's just um a illusory feeling that you got. Who knows, right? But let's continue. I just found a very interesting article that really breaks it down. So let me go ahead and get through this one real fast. It said, what really happens during a witching hour? Are you a believer of the supernatural? Do you believe that entities like ghosts, demons, witches, and other magical creatures actually exist and live among us? If so, then you probably have heard about the witching hour. As the name suggests, the witching hour is a time of day that people believe that these supernatural beings are most active and powerful. Many different communities have different hours of the day that they refer to as the witching hour, but the generally accepted time is between 3 and 4 a.m. Others believe that it is at midnight mainly because it is a special time when the day actually begins. So as you can see, it's basically repeating what we said earlier. But let's continue. What happens during witching hour? Depending on where you come from and what the society there believes to be real or myth, there are many different ideas on what actually happens during the witching hour. Below are some examples from different communities on what different supernatural creatures get up to during their special time. Witches, sorcerers, and other magical practitioners. Almost every community anywhere in the world believes in the existence of these. They happen to be the very reason why the whole idea of the witching hour was conceived. It is believed that at this time they carry out their various rituals in an attempt to top maximum magical power. Now, let's continue. Ghost. In some communities, there's the belief that during the witching hour, the barriers between the world of the living and the dead is lifted. You hear that? This allows ghosts to move in between the two realms. Although there isn't really any sufficient supportive evidence, there have been several cases of people who claim to have seen or heard ghosts at midnight or during the hours after midnight before sunrise. Now, Jay, of course, you experienced this, and I experienced this in places that were haunted. So, there you go. Let's continue. Demons and evil spirits, unlike ghosts, these are believed to roam the world in bodies of people or animals that they possess. They are also included in the witching hour theory, where they are believed to be most active and cause the most terror. And like I was saying earlier, when you got a ex-junkie or a person who used to smoke a lot or put poisons in their brain with cigarettes and substances, that's gonna affect their brain to the point where they actually believe that certain people are possessed by the devil or evil energy simply because they feel it, which they feelings mean nothing. So it's kind of funny, man, because I live with a person who fusses at another person when they do bad things, claiming that it's the devil or the devil got into them, but they always blame that person. So if the devil got into you and is making you do bad things, are you then responsible? Maybe not, because you ain't doing these actions. It's the devil doing these actions, right? It's funny, man. But some people believe this. I mean, when you look at the First 48, that's a popular TV show here in America that showcases the reason behind some of these murders. Normally when you watch the news, they talk about a murder, but they never talk about the story behind it. So this TV show crew basically follow cops who are investigating murders and in their attempt to try to catch the person who committed them. So normally when they catch the person always says something about from what I noticed, the higher power. See, the devil got into me at the time and made me do those things. I don't know, I was under a spell. But now I'm normal and God has forgiven me. Yeah, the courts ain't gonna forgive you though. Adios. So it's kind of funny. And some of these dudes actually believe it. So yeah, some people that just take that to the extreme. But let's continue reading. Mediums. Mediums are people who believe to have the ability to communicate with the dead and channel their spirit for other people to communicate with them. There are places where they are believed to be the most active during a witching hour. According to believers in the supernatural world, there's a relationship between the activity of ghosts and mediums at this hour. That's very interesting. Never knew that you can communicate with the higher power around this time. Well, not the higher power, but the supernatural powers. Let me continue. Other supernatural creatures. Other creatures such as vampire and werewolves are also believed to be most active not only during the witching hour but the entire night in general. Yeah, that goes back to some of those werewolf movies that you see, Werewolf in London and places like this. So that's what they get into. All right, let me continue reading. This section is called The History, and this is from the ghostdiaries.com. All right. The history of the witching hour. The witching hour is not something that just came up the other day. For as long as people have believed in the existence of people and creatures with unusual abilities, there have been the shared belief that they have special times of the day where they carry out their different activities. The term the witching hour was coined in 1560 by Pope John Paul II. You hear that? There was an agreement that the witching hour or hours ran between or anywhere between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. This was a time where there was a widespread frenzy and panic about witchcraft in the European regions. You hear that? So all of this stuff originated in Europe. Basically, when people was accusing women of being witches and would burn them, which it was an excuse to basically kill these women, quote unquote, legally. Let me continue reading. The Catholic Church was so serious about this matter that they laid down rules prohibiting activities during the witching hours. Anyone found out and about would be considered unholy and was punished by getting excommunicated. Now that's interesting because that still kind of goes on to this day. Like I was saying earlier, 3 a.m. is like the most calm time in the streets. Me personally, I liked it. So but keep in mind that not everybody believe this. This is basically some European stuff. Okay, so you know, people in Africa, for example, they still in certain countries in Africa, in certain villages and countries in Africa, people believe that there are witches, and they will accuse little kids of being witches. Women, there's all types of people till this day, no matter what time it is. So keep that in mind. Let me continue. The witching hour and witch hunting. Not too long after John or Pope John Paul II and the Catholic Church defined the witching hour, a hunting trend began in Europe. You hear that? It was a trend. I lost my place. Where was I? 1 second. The region was plagued with disease and political unrest, and many people believe this to be the work of witches and other people practicing magic. Now, the reason why, it was plagued with disease around this time was because witches were normally associated with cats, specifically black cats, and they would burn black cats to burn the witch, because the black cat was like, the witch's right hand man, best friend. Because they associate black with evil and energy. That's why they always say black people are innately cursed and all that. Nothing could be further from the truth. And that's why the disease popped off, because the flea that carried the bubonic disease, I think that's what it's called, instead of jumping on a cat, it was jumping on humans and killed millions because of this witching situation. That's what my teacher used to tell me. Did a little bit of research on it. Let me continue reading. This region was plagued with disease and political unrest, and many people believe this to be the work of witches and other people practicing magic. Suspicious citizens believe that the witches and supernatural creatures responsible for their misfortunes carry out their rituals at night while everyone was fast asleep to avoid getting caught. You hear that? To avoid getting caught. Suspicion. Other people believe that the witches and sorcerers practiced in the night because the darkness was the source of their power. That sounds like somebody we know who visits the chat room, who used to always dress in black and used to always have their lights off while drawing some crazy sorcery, weird stuff. And coincidentally, I believe that this person has some connections with New Orleans or Louisiana in some kind of way. So keep that in mind, Ward. Let me continue. And you got to keep in mind, New Orleans, that's like one of the worst cities in the world for like crime or whatever. There might be a spiritual reason behind that. Who knows? In spite of the differences in my opinion, they all agree that it was at the wee hours of the night where you will be most likely to catch the suspects in the act. This belief spread like wildfire, and soon many people were getting arrested and persecuted on witchcraft accusations simply because they was out and about during the witching hour. There is no sufficient evidence to support the claims of the mobs, but they truly believed that they were absolutely right. Yeah, that sound like some people I know, you know what I'm saying, and they're wrong. I ain't talking about you, Jay. I'm talking about somebody else. Let me continue. The same trend was repeated several times over the years, not only in Europe but also in the United States, with the famous being the Salem witch trials. That's what I was talking about earlier. The Salem witch trials. I mean, they was going crazy accusing people of witchcraft and then burning them. Let me continue. In a nutshell, belief in the witching hour has led to loss of countless lives over the years in the witch hunts. And right here, they have a picture of a bunch of people standing in a row, sort of like a circle, what looks to be like Stonehenge, maybe not, wearing all white. All right, next section of the article is almost done. The witching hour and other supernatural being. As the belief in the existence of the supernatural continues to grow, the witching hour is no longer limited only to witches. Over the years, there has been many claims of sightings and unusual creatures or activities during this given time interval. Generally, anything that is associated with darkness and evil has historically been considered potentially active during the witching hour. The witching hour and modern culture. It's time to get into the nitty-gritty. Technology and science are slowly replacing ideas about supernatural beings and abilities in modern societies. Things like witch hunts and exorcisms are very rare occurrences, but this does not in any way mean that everyone has abandoned their belief in the existence of the witching hour. Some people often experience breaks in their sleep where they find themselves waking up at odd hours of the night, including the witching hour itself. That has happened to me several times. And I know that happened to you as well, Jay. According to doctors and neuroscientists, this is completely normal brain behavior and should not cause alarm. This, however, does not stop some people from panicking and blaming the phenomenon on supernatural beings. The witching hour has also been adopted into modern society, literature, and film, with many movies and books being structured around that particular theme. Despite there being no actual evidence to support claims of supernatural events, it goes without saying that a lot of weird stuff happens during the witching hours. Yeah, true. Maybe it is people taking advantage of the hype created in the past in an attempt to scare people, or maybe it is actually the best time for people with the special abilities to tap into their powers. At the end of the day, it is your beliefs that matters. So that's it. That's it. And there are different comments where people are talking about what happened to them. Let me read a few of these comments. I had an experience when I woke up at the hospital. There were just two nurses stationed in 11 through 7 shift. Around 3 a.m. I was half asleep watching television. I was seeing strange black about 8 foot tall beside me in my right peripheral view, and in my left it was like a wedding dress, and I could feel a lot more of them in my back. So when I okay, so yeah, you can read it for yourself. This person just talk about seeing a lady in a wedding dress and seeing somebody else, one of those shadow spirits. This other person said, haha, lies. Y'all wild. Some people said it ain't real. Yeah. So that's what it is. It's called What Really Happens During the Witching Hour on the ghostdiaries.com website. You can read it for yourself. So this podcast has been 42 minutes long. I read a couple of articles about it. Should last. And the next one I'm going to read a few articles about the Ouija board from the True Ghost Stories because they seem very interesting. So that's where the 3 a.m. witching hour comes from, Jay. So that's what it is. And coincidentally, I'm doing it. So I'm doing it around 3 a.m. And it's going to be 4 a.m. in about 10 minutes. So there you go. And the lights are off. No energies. People in my house woke up and used the bathroom. The most negative one first. And that's just what it is, bro. So, thank you for listening, dog. You should be asleep right now. You know what I'm saying? So, this is your daily dose of ghosts. Peace.